The nation's longest-running traveling celebration of traditional arts, the National Folk Festival comes to downtown Jackson for the first time, November 7th through the 9th. A fun-filled weekend for the entire family, exploring roots, richness, and variety of American culture. Non-stop music and dance, folk life demonstrations, hands-on children's activities, signature Southern foods, crafts, and more showcasing the best of America, the best of Mississippi, all free. We'll see you in November. More at nationalfolkfestival.com.
Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, is the official companion podcast to the upcoming MPB original documentary, focusing on the life of Medgar Evers. The companion podcast, hosted by me, Rita Brent, will feature in-depth conversations, extended interviews, and exclusive archive footage not shown in the documentary. Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, video and audio episodes premiere September 18th. Find it on mpbonline.org or wherever you get your podcasts. MPB, your stories, our mission.
What's happening, Mississippi? From MPB Think Radio, this is the Sit Down with Russ Latino, where we explore the ideas and people that are shaping Mississippi's future. September 3rd already. The year has flown by. I don't know where all the time goes. We are joined in the booth by the always effervescent St. Germaine.
Hey, Russ.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good today.
Now, you're not on camera, but let me just...
I am. They've got one.
Oh, you are on
camera. Yeah, they keep it on me.
Well, they get to see how radiant you are then. I was remarking this morning that every time I come in, you get a different do, and I really like the one you're rocking now.
Thanks, Russ. And I'd let everybody know I can only rock dues for at least maybe 2.5, 3 weeks, and then I flip into a new one.
And, I'm jealous because I was saying this, I've been essentially having the same haircut since 1985.
No, I don't believe it.
Roughly the same haircut since 1985. So, a little jealous at your variety.
No, I'll give you all of this hair, Russ. I'll take yours, you take mine.
No. Wait, it'll be all right.
No.
So, yours fits your personality. Mine fits my personality.
That's right.
It works out. We are joined today by State Representative Jansen Owen from Pearl River County, where they put something in the water. Jansen is, I wouldn't say the snarkiest representative or senator at the Mississippi legislature, but he's in the running.
I love that compliment, honestly.
Before we get to Jansen, just a couple of bits of news from around the horn. You may have seen that Police Chief Joseph Wade, who was formerly with the Jackson Police Department, was let go as a part of the new John Horn administration in Jackson. He has found a job with Methodist Rehabilitation Center running their security. MBM and the Capitol Police announced a relatively large drug bust that included 100 pounds of methamphetamine. And look, I've watched Breaking Bad, but I'm not super familiar with the methamphetamine trade, but 100 pounds sounds like a lot.
That is.
That's a lot of meth. 2 pounds of marijuana, which seems like less comparatively.
To that, yeah.
Yeah. 1,000 doses of M30 counterfeit oxycodone that included or contained fentanyl, and a couple rifles, a stolen Ford Bronco, lots of good stuff. It's like, if you're going to do it big. Apparently these people were. A little bit of national news. The Fifth Circuit blocked deportations under the Aliens Enemy Act, which President Trump had been using to do part of his mass deportation program. We'll see if that holds. That was a 3-judge panel. We'll see if it goes on bonk. Ultimately, the Supreme Court will decide that. But anyway, they've basically found that an 18th century law probably didn't justify some of the stuff that was going on. And in the House of Representatives, House Ethics Committee released 33,000 pages of the Epstein files. A lot of conversation about
who's going to read them all.
Well, and it's all stuff we probably already know.
Okay.
Like the truth is, at this point, nothing news is going to come out that's going to shock the conscience.
Okay.
It's the problem is they built up so much hype about who all was going to be on it, and then persecuted by it because of their involvement in it. And it's like, at the end of the day, I think we know what we know.
Yeah.
So anyway. All that happening across the country, all that happening around Mississippi. the House of Representatives in Mississippi, I would say, has been bold in the last few years. I think they were bold before the last few years. I mean, I think under former Speaker Philip Gunn, they certainly did a lot of big things. Jason White, who is the current speaker, hit the ground running and decided, I think in some ways, to press the accelerator down. We saw that last year with the push around income tax elimination. It seems like that with the push around education freedom, school choice, whatever you want to call it. And kind of at the center of the conversation around education policy in Mississippi is the guy who's sitting across from me, Jansen Owen. Jansen has been really kind of a driver on a lot of the education policy in the last couple of years. I'm curious, Jansen, maybe as a starting point, how do you – terms like school choice, education freedom, they seem so nebulous. It's like, what does that actually mean? How do you define those terms?
Well, I like education freedom. I like school choice, all those terms I use. But what it comes down to me, my most simple definition is parents. One word, parents. I think parents fundamentally have the right to choose and dictate how and where their children are educated. That's my starting point when I talk about education freedom or school choice. It goes back to the parent. The parents know how to raise their children. They know what's best for their children. And we need to give them the freedom to make the decisions for their children's future moving forward. And that's where I start. And we talk about statistics. We talk about outcomes. Those are all very important things to debate. But at the end of the day, it always comes back to the parent.
In practice, what does that mean for you? So, like, fundamentally, I agree with you that, the family is the building block of society. Like, it is the initial foundation of societies, families, and then families that unite with each other in communities, and then communities that unite with each other in states, and so on, up the food chain. But at its heart, society is built around families. And so it makes sense to me that parents who are closest to their children, who, I won't say this without exception because there are some parents that are lousy, but the overwhelming majority of parents care more about their kids than anybody else will ever care about that person.
That's right.
So that makes sense to me. What, though, is in practice, what does it look like for a parent to have that kind of decision-making authority?
I mean, in its simplest forms, it looks like if a parent believes that their child is not being educated the way they should in a public setting, it empowers that parent to be able to take the money that we're having to invest in that child anyways and take that money to secure an education in some other mechanism, whether it be a private school, whether it be a home school, whether it be a specialized school or a charter school, or even another public school nearby that may be offering different programs. So it's just empowering the parent who sometimes won't or may not have the money to go and exercise these choice options. It's empowering them to be able to take that money and invest in their child's education in a manner that they believe fits that child best.
So a lot of people will hear that and say, okay, I'm with you on parents needing to be a part of the decision-making process. Do parents have sufficient information to be able to make those decisions, right? Most parents are not educators. At some level, they don't know sort of the steps of educating their child. Mm-hmm. Do parents have enough information to say, School A is not getting it done for my kid? And I see that because I see how it's affecting them at home. I see what the grades are. I see the learning level. But how do they know that School B is going to be that better option?
Well, I mean, most parents, they know how to research. They know how to look into, especially when it comes to their children. When your child's in the hospital facing a major surgery, all parents aren't surgeons either. They are making decisions that's best for their children based off of the available information, based off of the experts, based off of stuff they've read or experienced. So I do believe that a parent, when it comes down to educating their child and raising them for the future, they know enough and they know what's best for their children.
So what are you, like, as you are working on what I presume will be a big bill, a one big, beautiful bill?
We're really getting into that here lately.
what are the component pieces that you're looking at?
Well, it's multifaceted, of course. I know, and there's not a bill yet. We're still in the early stages of that. We're having our first hearings, but I know there are going to be a component that is that public-to-public school choice, similar to what we've worked on in the past, where a parent can move to another public school, and that sending public school cannot veto that parent's decision to leave. And we're looking at private school choice component that includes education savings accounts. And I'll just explain what ESAs are real quick. ESAs are education savings accounts. We basically take the state allotted money that we would send to a school, and we put it in an account, and the parent can use that money to spend on a wide variety of educational options, whether it be private school tuition, whether it be tutors, whether it be equipment, or other learning materials. It's a real wide variety of what the parent can spend the money on, and that money will follow the child wherever that child goes to be educated.
So we've got to take a break, but when we get back, I want to get more into the ESAs. I want to get more into open enrollment, and then I want to talk with you a little bit about some of the natural objections that come up when people are talking about this issue of school choice. A lot of people conceptually like the idea of having options. They worry about what it's going to do to their local public school. And so I want to dig into that with you a little bit. We're listening to the Sit Down with Russ Latino. We're talking today with House Representative Jansen Owen, who's kind of at the center of the education debate that's unfolding, that likely will be the biggest debate that goes on in the state legislature coming up in 2026. We'll be back in just a moment.
At the Mississippi Arts and Entertainment Experience in Meridian, we believe in the power of the arts, storytelling, and education, just like Mississippi Public Broadcasting. MPB connects communities across the state with quality programs that inform, inspire, and engage. Their audience is loyal and appreciative of businesses that support public broadcasting, which makes underwriting on MPB a smart investment. Join us in supporting MPB. Learn more at mpbfoundation.org.
When the weather turns severe, when breaking news affects your family, when Mississippi needs answers, MPB is there. We provide real-time emergency alerts, trusted news coverage, and live broadcasts of emergency updates. Available on TV, radio, and online. MPB is on the air and by your side every day of the year. Because when it matters most, Mississippi turns to MPB. Mississippi's trusted source. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, is the official companion podcast to the upcoming MPB original documentary, focusing on the life of Medgar Evers. The companion podcast, hosted by me, Rita Brent, will feature in-depth conversations, extended interviews, and exclusive archive footage not shown in the documentary. Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, video and audio episodes premiere September 18th. Find it on mpbonline.org or wherever you get your podcasts. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino, talking today with my guest, House Representative Jansen Owen, a little bit about this big issue that is percolating in the legislature. House Speaker Jason White has made it very clear that coming off of the income tax elimination push, that school choice is his number one priority going into this legislative session. Jansen Owen, who serves on the House Education Committee, and has been, sort of a vocal leader in this space. We're talking a little bit with him today about what that's actually going to look like. So I think you made an important point. Like, when people talk about school choice, it's not one thing, right? So like, a lot of people hear school choice and they think about open enrollment policies, public school to public school transfers. And you hear some people actually on the right that are kind of concerned with the idea of public to public transfers because they think, hey, we've got a really good public school, a really good community built around this public school. We don't want to just see an influx of students from outside of the district. How do you respond to some of that criticism around that particular policy?
So with the open enrollment policy, there's actually been a lot of misinformation spread around, usually by the opponents in the system as it currently exists. But the open enrollment policy, we're not forcing these schools to take anybody. The receiving district still has the discretion. The board has to vote. The board elected by the people of that district still has to vote to accept these students. So there's no mandate that these kids are being pushed into these other districts. The only thing this bill does is it eliminates the sending district, the district that the child is trying to leave, and eliminates the ability for that district to tell a parent, wait, no, I know better than you. Your kid needs to stay here regardless of what you think. We're vetoing your decision. We're not letting your child leave, which under the current law, a sending district, your home school district, if you decide to move your child to another district and they accept you, and they're going to make you pay $400 in tuition to bring your kid there for whatever reason, your district, your home district can say, no, we're vetoing your decision. Your child's staying right here where they are. And, you know, a lot of times that's motivated by the fact that when the child leaves, with it goes the money attached to that child. So a lot of misconception is around this idea that we're just pushing these kids into these districts, and these districts won't have any say into who they take, how many they take. But ultimately, the discretion for the receiving district falls to their school board. We're not forcing a ton of kids into these districts.
Yeah, when I watched the debate on this last year, and you led on the bill, spoke from the well on the bills, you know, and obviously it passed in the House and then died in the Mississippi Senate. It struck me that a lot of people don't understand what the current law is because Mississippi already has open enrollment, right?
Right.
It's what you described, though, a situation where in order for the kid to move, both the school he's leaving and the school he's going to have to agree. And there are all sorts of financial reasons for the school he wants to leave to say no. And that's the state allotment of money that goes with that kid. But if the kid's in a situation there where he's not thriving, whether it be academically, whether it be socially, maybe he's getting bullied, whatever the situation is, it seems kind of unfair to keep them there if the other school is willing to take him. And most states do it this way, right? It's the receiving school that gets to decide whether or not to take the kid. I think the other thought process, which is, okay, well, you're suddenly going to have hundreds of kids leave a bad school and go to the neighboring good school, is also kind of naive based on experience in other states. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, well, one, I'll say this: if 100 kids or more are trying to leave a school, if 100 parents have decided to take their children out of a school, there's something wrong with that school. That's the first issue. Okay, the second thing is, it goes back again to in every bill we've passed out of the House. I think we've passed this 2 or 3 years in a row. I can't remember exactly. I know I've done the bill several times. In every single bill, we put protections in there for those receiving districts, making sure that we're not forcing them to accept anybody. I know I sat down with some representatives from even the Madison County School Board, and we worked on some changes to the language just to make it clear, even more clear than it already was, that we're not forcing these receiving districts to take any kids. I don't think, for the sending district, I don't think that money, the financial part, is sufficient for a school district to veto a parent's decision as to what's best for their children. And I believe that you're seeing us talk about this, this drama around taking kids and receiving kids and overcrowding our classrooms. I believe that is being pushed because the argument that, we don't want to lose this money in these districts is not going to be a winning argument. They're wanting to push out this dramatic, we're going to overtake our schools with these kids from other districts because that's the only way they can rile people up. They know that they can't win on the argument, we want them to stay here because that money needs to stay in the school.
Well, and I attended a PTO meeting. My kids are in Madison County Public Schools. and I attended a PTO meeting last year where the superintendent of Madison County Public Schools handed out a card that I think was written by an advocacy organization. I don't think Madison County Schools came up with it. And I won't divulge what was a confidential conversation, but I'm pretty sure the card wasn't a Madison County card. And, it said that allowing for kids to transfer between public schools would destroy the culture of Madison County schools and destroy property value. And I'm not going to assume these sorts of insidious motives, but the language was reflective of a language from the 1960s,
Right.
when people talked about how integration was going to destroy property values and culture. It struck me as too close to a line and also really disingenuous.
Yeah, I remember when that came out. I was very upset about that particular. The only unfortunate thing is it did have Madison County School District's logo on it. So even if they didn't write it, they still got to take credit for it. And I agree with you. It sounded a lot like something we heard back in the 1960s when they were trying to keep black kids out of white schools. And unfortunately, regardless of what we want to think, sometimes that is an issue that still percolates to the surface even today. I do think that, I do think the opposition likes to push out these different ideas, these different points of argument that's not entirely accurate or honest, because they know they're going to lose on the argument when it comes down to it. The real argument that comes back again to the parents.
Yeah, so I've known now a handful of parents, in fact, one that I talked to recently, who literally took the step of giving up custody of their child to either an ex-spouse or a grandparent in order to get that kid enrolled in a school that they thought was going to be better for that kid. And it just strikes me that no parent should ever have to do that. Right? I mean, one, it shows you the sacrificial love of a parent.
Right.
But it strikes me that no parent should ever have to do that.
Right. I actually had somebody in my office this week who wanted their child to go to another school because the classroom size was too big at the school that they were in, and they signed over guardianship to her parents, to her children, so that they could put that child in a school that she thought fit the needs of that child better. And that is unfortunate. When if we had this bill on the books, then she could have just transferred the child there as long as that school had accepted them.
The other thing you see sometimes is you see these situations, and I've not seen this in Mississippi, but I've seen it in other states, where parents are literally arrested for lying about their residence in order to get their kids into another school. And I mean, at some level you go, well, they are breaking the law, right? They're committing a fraud by saying they live somewhere they don't live. But again, it just strikes you that, like, look, we live in a system where, like, there's such desperation to ensure that your child gets the opportunity to prepare themselves for life that you're willing to lie about where you live and face legal consequences because you want what's best for your kid.
To give your child the education you think they deserve. And it's unfortunate that we put parents in that position.
So that's one policy. You mentioned ESAs, which are education savings accounts. That's kind of all the rage. I think when President Trump, as an example, talks about school choice, he's talking about ESAs. You've seen Louisiana do their Gator scholarships. Arkansas has their universal ESA program. Alabama's passed a program. Tennessee's passed a program. Florida has long been at the sort of cutting edge of this quote-unquote school choice movement. But, Florida, recently passed an ESA on top of a tax credit scholarship program they had, on top of one of the biggest open enrollment programs in the country, on top of a big charter school program. We're kind of surrounded by states that have done this. Mechanically, how do ESAs work? Because I think when people hear, we want to create an education savings account, there are a lot of questions. There may be sort of like favoritism on the front end, and I've seen polling on this. It's plus 70% in Mississippi. So there's favoritism around the concept. And then the questions come, well, how does it actually work? Is it going to be super expensive?
So basically, every child in Mississippi is allotted a number. Under our funding formula, they're allotted a certain base student cost that we spend per child. Let's say right now it's $6,500. I think it's more like $68 or something along those lines. So what an ESA would do is, instead of sending that money directly to school, we would put it in an account for the parent to spend. And we would, of course, it would be limited to educational expenses, whether it be computers or tutors or whatnot. And that money the parent uses to educate their child in the way that they best sees fit. And then from there, some states have done it differently. If there's leftover money, it rolls over. Some states send it back. I know we were talking to Dr. Lindsay Burke. She came from D.C. this past week and spoke about Arizona's bill, or their law, where it lets the student roll over any leftover funds. And there was a particularly disabled student who was blind, and he was able to purchase all of his Braille materials. He was able to go to a specialized tutor to teach him as a blind student. And this $15,000 or $16,000 a year he received because he was disabled, he was having leftover money. So he was actually saving money getting a superior education than what he would have received in a public school. And by the time he graduated, it rolled over, and the state allows those students to take his leftover ESA funds to put towards college education. So the fact that, in Arizona we would have spent, or that state would have spent $28,000 on that kid, he did it for $16 and still had money left over. So it's interesting how, once you enable the market and you enable parents to make decisions, how well they can spend the money.
We're talking with State Representative Jansen Owen a little bit about the school choice push that's going to happen in the Mississippi House of Representatives. When we come back from break, I want to talk with Jansen about the objections that you hear to the idea of school choice, the consequence around expenses, the consequence to public schools, and really kind of dig into those objections and see what the representative has to say. You're listening to The Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bobby Rush. As a blues man, I love Mississippi Public Broadcasting. If you support Mississippi music and their local programming, donate now, right now, and become a member today, not tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Doesn't matter how big or small, but we prefer big. Thank you very much.
The Measuring Show.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. Please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Every parent wants their child to grow, to explore, and to dream big. At MPB, we're proud to support families and teachers across Mississippi with trusted educational programming and resources that inspire learning and spark imagination. From PBS Kids Favorites to digital tools and early learning support, MPB is here for young minds, engaged classrooms, and families who believe in the power of learning at every age. Empowering families, inspiring learners. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Listening to The Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino, talking today with House Representative Jansen Owen. Germaine Flood has been replaced in the booth. Good to see you.
Glad to help.
I'm I'm rotating through producers. That's how it works, you know. They just get tired of me and a new one comes in. So we were talking before the break about some of the proposals that are likely to be a part of a House package on education choice or school choice. I want to go through just sort of a string of objections that I hear and get your response. So one objection that I hear is that, and this one is inflammatory, right? It's that this is a return to segregation academy. So in the 1960s, as integration occurred, you saw this proliferation of private schools across Mississippi and the Deep South that were largely white people deciding, okay, if you're going to force integration, then we're going to open up our own private schools for our own kids. And the argument goes that things like ESAs are just another way to segregate wealthy or white people from poorer people, whether they be white or an ethnic minority. How do you respond to that?
Well, I will say look at the ESA programs across the country. So, yeah, universal ESAs where they're broad like we have right now, of course, that's new over the last few years. But school choice has been around in states in some form or fashion for decades now. And in those states, you will see, studies will show that schools that are participating in these school choice programs are actually more diverse, both economically and racial, than even the public school system. So that it's just not having that effect that the opposition wants to say will happen. Of course, they want a fearmonger, and it's actually proving to be a more diverse type of education in a lot of these areas.
One of the arguments that you hear, and by the way, I should say this, that I'm familiar with some of the studies in other states. I mean, the fact is that it leads to a more integrated population in a lot of these private schools, for sure. Right. The flip side of that, though, would be that, okay, what does it do at the school that is losing students, right? Does it undermine their already difficult ability to provide a good education?
Well, I'm a conservative, put that out there. I believe in the free market. So what school choice does, it brings the market into the system of education that right now is just limited government-run schools. It brings competition into that system of education. So what the schools do, if they're poised to lose students, they start making decisions to change themselves. They want to keep those kids there. They're incentivized to be innovative. They're incentivized to improve, spend more money in the classroom, and focus on the student. So if you look at some of these states, I believe there's like 30 studies or so, 28 I think, show a positive improvement in student outcomes in the public school systems after school choice programs are implemented. So you're not only showing that students who are leaving and going to private schools or other educational options are improving, you're showing that the market impact, the market pressures on those public schools are incentivizing them to improve, to attract, and keep those students there.
You know, it's interesting that you say that because we've had a lot of conversation around the quote-unquote Mississippi miracle, right? And some people bristle at the miracle part of it because they say, well, you know, that's good hard work by educators and administrators that led us to this point. And I think there's some truth to that part. I'd also say that's, you know, parents getting more engaged. And candidly, the legislature made some good policy decisions. But it is interesting that you saw this uptick in Mississippi's NAEP scores at the same time that things like charter schools were being passed, at the same time things like the special needs ESA were being passed, that at some level may have made people who are in the current system go, hey, look, we've got to improve our game. Because there might be competition coming down the pike.
Exactly. I mean, even I know that our current school choice scheme is pretty limited with our special needs ESAs and the charter schools, but the system has been, I don't want to say fearing, but you've heard from a particular group for 15 years now.
The Parents Campaign.
Yeah. School choice is coming. Y'all better watch out. So the fear and the pressure has been there, and I believe that has incentivized improvement amongst the public school sector, just the idea that we could have more and more choice over the years.
So one argument that I've heard is that irrespective of whether or not you think it's a good idea, it's unconstitutional in Mississippi. Mississippi has a provision of the Constitution that essentially says that no public money can be directed to private schools. This was a part of a movement, candidly, that was anti-Catholic way back in the day with Blaine amendments, and the concern was that public money was going to end up supporting the Catholic Church. There was a period where a lot of people thought of what they would call papist back in the day, the same way that they thought of some of the minorities that were discriminated against. And so you had this rash of states put in Blaine amendments that the U.S. Supreme Court has now said are unconstitutional.
That's right.
I'm curious, though, how you respond to the argument that Mississippi's Blaine Amendment is not specific to religion, but it says essentially no public money to private schools. Do you think that something like an ESA is constitutional and would pass constitutional muster?
100%. The main reason why is because we're not sending money to private schools. We're sending money to the parents. We're giving the money to the parents to make a decision as to where to spend that money. So there's no direct appropriation to any private school. And also the Mississippi Supreme Court's already held that our ESA program is constitutional.
The special needs
ESA program.
Yeah.
So that question has been tested at the state Supreme Court, and it's passed constitutional muster as it is. So that's just a old, tired, wrong argument.
Yeah, I mean, there's also a case that I think is like 80 years old, but it involved a situation in which the state had made an appropriation for textbooks. Mm-hmm. And it included textbooks for children at private schools as well as public schools. And there was a constitutional challenge to that program saying that you're essentially sending money to private schools. And the Supreme Court then even said, no, you're sending the money to the families and they're electing to purchase these books while they're at a private school.
That's right.
And made that distinction. So I'm curious, you hear people use the word voucher a lot. In your mind, is there a distinction between a voucher and an ESA?
Yeah, a voucher is just a coupon to pay tuition at a private school, and ESA is way more expansive than that, way more options, way more flexibility. And I think, in my opinion, I think it's better because it, again, brings the market into the system, and it gives the parents more choices as to what they can utilize the money on.
So one of the other arguments that I've heard over time is that effectively what you're doing is you're sending a check. So let's say the current allotment for a student, the state allotment per pupil expenditure is $6,800. That you're sending that money to kids that are already in private schools, that can already afford it. Is the program that you're envisioning, would it allow someone who is already in a private school to take advantage of the ESA? And if so, how would you respond to the argument that, hey, this is going to be a big additional expense?
I think any program that we do will have to have a phase-in approach. Of course, it's going to cost money. So ultimately, I do see children who are currently in private schools being able to participate. But in order to watch the pocketbook, I think you're going to have to see a phase-in approach where we do a certain sector of children first, and then eventually over the years it becomes more expansive to include everyone. I will say this, though. We talk about these kids in private schools. I know I have a private school in Puerto Rico County. Tuition is roughly $5,500 a year. The richest people in Puerto Rico County aren't going there. It's not like those people at this Heritage Christian Academy in Picayune are millionaires. These parents are parents who, instead of buying a new car, they're putting $500 a month aside to send their kid to another school. So I don't like to just assume that every person who attends a private school already is somehow super rich or wealthy moving forward. I think it's important to remember that we have parents right now who are working hard to send their children to private schools because they believe that's the best education for them, and they're probably cutting a lot of stuff out of their budget to do so. But I do ultimately see a program in the future where kids in the private school would be participating. I will say this, though: if every single one of those kids stopped tomorrow and went to a public school, we'd have to pay for them to be educated anyways. We don't say, the private school system in Mississippi is saving our state $300 or $400 million a year right now because we're not having to educate those kids. So I think If we just go back to the concept that we believe all children should be educated, we can get out of the business of deciding who's in private school, who's in public school, and just focus on the child and the parents.
It strikes me at some level, too, that those arguments sort of ignore that the people who have kids in private schools are also paying property taxes and sales taxes and income taxes that fund the entire education system to begin with. At some level, if you think about the way that government operates, I mean, it operates on money earned by humans,
right?
by regular old private citizens. And then government has made the decision that education is a really important thing to prepare kids for life. And so the question becomes, well, how best do you prepare a kid for life? And there are some kids that are going to be prepared exceedingly well at their local public school. I mean, both of my kids are in their local public school. Mm-hmm. We think it's great. We know their teachers. We know the principals. I've got no intention of moving them anywhere as things sit now. But there are going to be some kids that actually would benefit from another environment. And if we're all paying property taxes and we're all paying income taxes, we're all paying sales taxes, why would one set of people get access to a program and another set of people be excluded from that program?
That's right. I don't like that idea. And I also think it's penalizing parents for exercising the choice that we're working so hard to give to everybody. So I'm not a fan of excluding them. I do think we're going to have to phase it in, maybe by income level or something like that. So naturally some of those would be excluded until we get to the full phase-in approach. And we're going to have to, we've got to watch the money. And also we've got to get the votes. So.
We're talking with State Representative Jansen Owen. We've got to take another brief break. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio.
Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, is the official companion podcast to the upcoming MPB original documentary, focusing on the life of Medgar Evers. The companion podcast, hosted by me, Rita Brent, will feature in-depth conversations, extended interviews, and exclusive archive footage not shown in the documentary. Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, video and audio episodes premiere September 18th. Find it on mpbonline.org or wherever you get your podcasts. MPB, your stories, our mission.
At the Mississippi Arts and Entertainment Experience in Meridian, we believe in the power of the arts, storytelling, and education, just like Mississippi Public Broadcasting. MPB connects communities across the state with quality programs that inform, inspire, and engage. Their audience is loyal and appreciative of businesses that support public broadcasting, which makes underwriting on MPB a smart investment. Join us in supporting MPB. Learn more at mpbfoundation.org.
Hello, I'm Desiree Frazier, host of the award-winning news program, Mississippi Edition. We bring you conversations about the latest news from across the Magnolia State. Whether it's politics, healthcare, or education, you'll hear in-depth discussions on issues that matter to you. So join us each weekday morning at 8:30 on MPB Think Radio, or download the podcast, listen through the app, and online.
You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino right here on MPB Think Radio, talking today with House Representative Jansen Owen about the House's big push around education choice. Jansen, one of the things that I think in the past hasn't been present is you've got a White House that is really interested in this issue. So in the past, when people in Mississippi have brought up this idea as a potential part of the game, you've not had that sort of leadership support. That now you've got a president who says it's the civil rights issue of our time. You've got an education person in place, and Linda McMahon, who very much is passionate about the issue. Obviously, Lindsey Burke was down testifying in front of the House committee on this issue. What impact do you think President Trump's strong support for school choice in Mississippi will have on the legislature?
I mean, I think it'll have a huge impact. Personally, my district voted for President Trump 84% of the vote. So my people trust the president to make policy decisions. They gave him a mandate to push his policies to bring parental freedom back to the forefront. And this is the first administration in history where we've actually made gains in the education freedom realm. If you look at just recently in the One Big Beautiful Bill, there's even a school choice piece in that. So I think it provides some cover to some of these members who may feel like that these teachers groups may try to get them beat or may try to run an opponent against them. I think it gives members cover. Hey, the president supports this. If you look at in Texas, the president was key in passing the reforms in Texas. And when they finally did pass the school choice program, he immediately, just recently, has sent out endorsements to those members who voted for the bill. So I think the president's support is going to be key to us getting this across the finish line, and the pressure from D.C. will be extremely helpful.
Yeah, one of the things that I've seen recently is really an argument about Mississippi's progress, which is to be celebrated, right?
Right.
It's like, hey, we're having all these gains over the last 13 years or so. Again, I think not coincidentally around the same time that all these school choice proposals started to percolate. Why would we mess up an upward trajectory? And then also a comparison to some other states that have done ESA programs that maybe aren't having the same sort of success that Mississippi has seen. How do you respond to that?
Well, one, Mississippi started from the very, very bottom, so there's a lot of room to make up there compared to other states who have started these programs. Secondly, we made a lot of what were then controversial reforms to the system, and we've continued making those reforms over the last few years, and I don't think it's time to stop. I don't think our children can afford us to sit around and say, okay, hey, let's wait for 10 years and see if this keeps going this way. We are in a situation where we are seeing that our reforms are working in the system. And even with our reading scores increasing, there's still a good significant chunk of children in Mississippi who are still not proficient in reading right now. So I don't think we need to, of course, award and celebrate our success, but the work's not done. We don't just stop right now while we're doing good.
That's rational to me. I think it's hard for a lot of people to wrap their brains around because they see all the success being celebrated, but at the same time may not be able to say, okay, that's good, but not enough.
Right.
And you're right. I mean, I think the number for fourth grade is like 68% of kids are still not proficient in reading.
Right.
Which seems like an awful lot to me. And, if you look at eighth grade, it's even worse. Right. And so, yes, it's awesome that we've moved from 50th up to 16th. That is an achievement. But do we want 68% being not proficient as our high water mark?
That's right.
And I would say the answer to that is obviously got to be no. I mean, in an ideal world, that number would be like 90% proficient.
Right.
And we're very, very far from that. There's been a conversation that really the governor started with a Facebook post and then a couple of tweets about whether or not he would call a special session on this issue. We're 4 months away, less than 4 months away now from the start of the 2026 session. Do you think there's a chance of a special session on this issue?
I mean, that's ultimately the governor's call. He did tweet something about that a couple of weeks ago. So with that being said, I do think there's a chance. I mean, he put it out there as a possibility. If there is a special session, hopefully it's not at Christmas time, so not at Thanksgiving. So that's narrowing our days down to now September, October, maybe early November. So if the governor ultimately does decide to call a special session, I think it would be a good opportunity for us to come to Jackson and focus on this one singular issue that is so important without having to be bogged down into the pressure and the politics of a regular session.
I watched the debate in the Mississippi Senate last year on the Children's Promise Act, which was not a school choice bill.
Right.
It was a bill about whether or not you could get a tax credit for essentially giving money to a private school for improvements to the private school, but it was not intended for one school to go to, or one child to go to another school.
Right.
And in that debate, there was a lot of repetition around anti-school choice sentiment from Republicans, particularly this line, no public dollars to private schools. I've said elsewhere that I think that's kind of a ridiculous argument given the fact that we all support Pell Grants that obviously can be used in private schools and in many other areas allow for private money or public money to go to private vendors in order to accomplish a public good, road builders, et cetera.
I mean, I remember a few years ago the Senate sent a project down that gave $10 million to William Carey, so that's a private school.
Do you think there's a chance that my read of the room is that the House has or will have the votes to get this done? Do you think there's a chance of getting it done in the Senate, or is that the roadblock?
Well, first, I don't want to take any of my House members for granted. We're still in the early stages of this. I don't even think we've started counting the votes or anything. What I do believe on our end of the building is we have a lot of people who are committed to the principles of being a conservative and being a Republican. And we recognize that it's been in our party platform for 40 years. Our president supports it, and we want our children to be able to exceed. On the Senate side, of course, every time we've tried to pass a major reform since I got elected, whether it be the tax cut or the formula, they've said no at first, and eventually they came along.
So we'll see how all this unfolds. It's a very interesting conversation. Expect it to be a big debate. Jansen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The Sit Down is a production of Mississippi Public Broadcasting Think Radio, made possible thanks to the generous support of listeners like you. If you enjoy the guests and sit-downs we bring each week, please consider contributing to help keep this show and shows like it on the air. Visit mpbonline.org or to show your support, or you can use the MPB app. Today's show was co-produced by Germaine Flood with live stream production by Abram Nanny and Kevin Farrell. For my guest, Jansen Owen, I'm Russ Latino. Stay tuned for Southern Remedy right here at 11 a.m. Great show coming up. And join us here next week for a new episode of The Sit Down, only on MPB Think Radio.